Hey everyone, welcome back to Miniature Painting 101, a series of videos where we teach you all about painting miniatures from start to finish and everything in between. And this is part 122, Warscythe Blades. As for by you, I am going to paint a Warscythe blade in the standard scheme from the Codex. You want to know how? So here's how to do it. So today we'll be painting this Warscythe blade. Now it's primed black since I'll be doing a lot of dark greens over it. And we'll start off with Caliban Green. Now the keys with Caliban Green and all these paints is thin them down. I always use Lamy medium, nice and thin. That way they go in multiple coats and they blend quite nicely together. So started off by giving the entire Warscythe blade just a Caliban Green base coat, including into the crevices as you can see here on both sides of it. Just using a nice big brush, getting all the paint onto it carefully, but as you can see it's nice and thin. I thinned down some Lamy medium on my palette, and I'm using a wet palette so that it keeps it nice and fresh, because I'll be blending multiple colors. A wet palette is a great time saver, and also it's great for blending paints, and that way it maintains the paints, and you don't need to constantly remix the paints. So as you can see, just getting a nice Caliban Green coat on the entire Warscythe. And that's it. So now I'm going to take a Bile Tan shade and apply it over the entire Warscythe. Now the purpose of the shade is just to get into the recesses and give the symbols on the Warscythe a really dark green color. That's basically it. It's going to bring out the details, and then we're going to overbrush over that and then highlight around them. But it's just basically going to make them almost an off black. They're going to be so dark, but it brings back the details in these areas. As always, after applying a shade, make sure it's completely dry before proceeding to the next steps. And if you're unhappy with the shading, feel free to do a second one. I don't think it's going to be a problem in this case because Bile Tan is a very dark green. As you can see, just getting a nice solid coat over the entire surface. And when that was completely dry, I then did an overbrush. So basically focused on the raised surfaces, once again with my thinned down Caliban Green. So as you can see, just going to paint over the entire surface. And just letting all the recesses be the Bile Tan shaded areas. And now we've established basically the base color of the blade. And now it's time to start highlighting. So now I'm going to take some Warpstone Glow and add it into the mix. So it's a 1-to-1 mix of Caliban Green and Warpstone Glow. And now it's time to start the highlighting. So as you can see, I'm basically going to define the gradients. I'll choose each part of the blade and do a different gradient on it. So at the edge, I'm going to start brightest outwards towards inwards. I'm going to do an edge highlight over the top of the Warscythe. And then I'm going to follow around all of the recesses. And this part, you're going to define the glow. So I'm going to go all around the recesses of the Warscythe blade, but I'm going to intentionally go a bit on each side. And this is going to define the outer edges of the glowing effect. It's going to be a little hard to see with these steps, but with each preceding step, it's going to get easier and easier to see because it's just going to be, brighter and more contrast. So as you can see, I'm just going all around the recesses, and then there's also the bottom part of the sickle blade. So for that one, once again, I'm going to choose which way I'm going to do the contrast, and for both ones on this side, I'm going to do the brightest colors on the left and darkest colors on the right. So I'm just going to use this thin down combination and start a nice gradient of colors on these parts of the blade. And that's basically it. I repeated this process on the other side of the blade. Now I'm going to just take Warpstone Glow by itself and repeat this process. So once again, start it at each edge and surface and highlight it up accordingly. Of course, not going as far as I did the previous step. So with this outer edge, as you can see, I just stopped a little bit short of where I did the previous step. And for the lining along all of the ridges, I of course did not go as far out as I did the previous step. And for the blade parts, I started with the same left side and work my way towards the right side, of course finishing not as further down as I did the previous step. It's just creating a quick gradient. And of course, with every step in this painting process, I thin down my paints with Lamy medium. That way, once again, they're thinner paints, they blend much nicer together, and they work better. So it's a great circumstance. Now the key is you got to be careful when going around the ridges. You don't want to accidentally drop the paint into the ridge, because then you have to repaint that part after. As you can see, I'm just tracing around the ridges as I did the previous step, and then I'll do a nice edge highlight over the top of the blade anyway as well. So So as you can see now, I'm just doing a nice edge highlight over the blade as well with Warpstone Glow. And that's all we're going to do. We're just going to repeat this process over and over again with brighter and brighter colors to create a slight glowing effect around the ridges and to really make them pop. Not a too complicated process, but I will make this tutorial for you because you asked for it, of course. And now I'm going to do a 1-to-1 mix of Warpstone Glow and Moot Green. This is from this. It's a trio of colors from the Citadel range. And of course, when adding more Moot Green, I thin down the paint a little bit more with Lamy Medium and repeat this process once again. So starting at the left side, working my way a little bit towards the right side, and then tracing around all of the symbols, doing a little bit on the edges of the blade, starting on the left side, working my way a little bit towards the right side, and then doing an edge highlight. Now for the edge highlight, what I intentionally did was, for the edge highlight, as you can see, there's sections along the top of the blade, and what I intentionally did was, with each edge highlight, I worked my way towards the center. So I did less and less edge highlighting, and I just tried towards the center of each section of the blade to make it pop, and the edges and towards the edges of the section would be the darker colors. As you see, just going around and tracing all around the nice symbols on this Warscythe. With this 1-to-1 combination of Warpstone Glow and Moot Green. And then my edge highlight, as you can see, to more central with each one. And of course it will dry a little bit darker than it was before. And then I repeat this process along the other side of the blade. Just tracing along the edges. Starting with the blade edge, and then tracing along the relics, as you can see. So it's a pretty simple process. And then of course we're going to do it with one more step after this. And of course I should mention with the symbols, I did go afterwards and just tint the very center of those circles with the older colors, and I used my wet palette to do so. By just working in the center parts and just doing a dot in the center parts. That way I brought it back towards the darker colors, like the 1-to-1 mix of Warpstone Glow and Caliban Green. And then I did the same thing once again with Moot Green. So as you can see on the very edge highlight, I'm just doing the very center parts of each of the sections of the top, and then I'm going to do a tiny trace around the ridges, and then a very just thin line along the very edge of the blade. And we're just going to do that. And we're creating our glow. And that's it for this painting process. It's not too complicated, but just working with gradients. So thin down your paints, keep the gradients consistent, and take your time. And make sure just to do thinner and thinner each time, less and less paint, less and less steps. And that's the key with these. So with each step, you should be using less and less paint, and just be a little more careful than the previous steps. And that's it. So after it's completely dry, here's what the blade looks like when it's completely done using that process. And as you can see, we have a nice glow going from it, and it is consistent with what the appearance is from the codex. And that's a pretty simple way of painting a Warscythe blade using a combination of colors from the Citadel range, just greens. So thank you as always for watching this episode of Miniature Painting 101. I really hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for next week's episode, part 123, which is just around the corner. But if you don't want to wait for next week, check out The Warp. Click on the link below for a free 14-day trial to my premium YouTube channel. We're not going to see the next 6 months worth of Miniature Painting 101 episodes before anyone else. You'll see over 100 start to finish painting tutorials, battle reports, face-off episodes, and Airbrush 101 series. Just some awesome wargaming content, and it helps support my videos. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I really hope you liked it. Until next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.